Right, yeah, so yeah, before we get into the video, so just, yeah, remember you're talking about significance of optical illusion, optical correction, and visual balance in calligraphy and font design. So yeah, this is something that is pretty much for every typeface that we create, we have to consider those things. For people that are in the type industry, they might be even obvious, but for starters, or for even like they say the broader audience, the graphic designers that actually use fonts, is something they hardly cross their minds about what we have to do on the background. And then so yeah, this presentation will be covering this. And yeah, no further ado, I'll pass the word to our speaker that will get into that topic. I'll just prepare the video. So yeah, we'll have, see it popping up the video. Just froze for a second. So as if you participate of a previous session of ATypI, you know that we play a video and then at the end we have a Q&A session. So please, if you have any questions at any time, you can write on the chat. You can either use the chat or the second icon. There's like a little question mark. That goes only for us. But if you want to share a question with everybody, feel free to use the chat channel. That's either of us or either of them work for us. So yes, so let's get into the presentation, and then later on we'll wait you guys for having a chat.
Good day, everyone. Today I am going to talk about the significance of optical illusion, optical correction, and visual balance in calligraphy and font design. I will be talking about three things in today's talk. First is about some of the optical illusions in fonts. Then we move on to calligraphy with a focus on brush pen calligraphy. And then the third part will be on muller layer illusion and serifs in typography. So first is I will take a brief look into some of the optical illusions found in font design. So all the typography enthusiasts and all font designers are trained and aware of all this illusion. There are 100 different ways of correcting the optical illusions in font design. I'm just sharing a few to start the background information for the main focus on the calligraphy thing. So I've taken Roboto Black as the starting point as an example for showing the illusions. So one is that in all monolinear fonts, special care is taken by the font designer to create an illusion of equal thickness. In mathematical terms, none of the strokes are of equal thickness, but visually, we create an appeal, we create an illusion of the strokes being of equal thickness. If you look at the mathematical values, the vertical stroke is much thicker than the horizontal stroke. But because of certain aspects of the eye and the way we perceive things, we have to do this kind of corrections to achieve a illusion or appearance of a font where all the strokes appear to be of the same thickness. The same thing happens with the way we use the crossbars and the way we use the centering of elements inside a font. So there is this concept of optical center and the mathematical center. So in typography, whenever we design fonts, we always keep the optical center. So optically, we do the compensation for optical illusions and get the feeling that the units are balanced, the negative space is balanced, it appears to be balanced. So in this case, the same character, there are three different ways of aligning the crossbars. So when we look carefully, the one of them appears to be more visually balanced than the others. So this is the reason for that. That it is kept, the crossbar is kept at the optical center, and in the right one, the middle one, the mathematical center, it is kept, and the third one, it is kept in the below the center. So this is taught in most of the design schools, whenever we design fonts, we take conscious decisions to place elements in such a way that it compensate for the optical illusions. Then we create an illusion of equal height. All the characters in any font, if you take, they appear to be of the same height, but in mathematical terms, they are never of the same height. So many places you will see this concept is called the overshoot, that we keep curves protrude above the cap height, and at the bottom it goes below the baseline. So this is commonly used in all languages or in all font design activities to create an illusion of equal height. So this applies to almost all the languages, all the scripts. So it is a conscious decision, and this is also taught to the font designer to create this kind of overshoots to compensate for the optical illusion. So it is a conscious decision taken by designers. And if you look at X, for example, X is a treasure of examples of optical correction in typography. So there are 100 things to learn from the design of this letter X. So if you take the angle of one stroke, it will not be matching the corresponding stroke above the middle line. So there are a lot of optical corrections done by the font designer to compensate for the movement of the eye and the perception of getting a symmetrical visual structure. So there are a lot of this kind of corrections done in this letter form X. It itself is a very important lesson in font design itself. And if you look at many other characters, for example, if you take lowercase b, for example, that the corresponding lines might not be the matching each other, and a lot of corrections are done in the negative spaces where a curved structure goes and meets the vertical stem. These are all done consciously to compensate for the optical illusions. If you like, universe black is a wonderful example of how optical corrections are done, and you can see the negative space, the ellipse, how it intrudes into the stem, cutting across the mathematical guideline. So this is a very good example of how optical corrections are done in Roman typography. I will move on to optical illusions in brush pen calligraphy. The important thing in brush pen calligraphy is that in most of the other calligraphic activities is that these are not conscious decisions. These are all visual based decisions taken many times subconsciously taken by calligraphers. But in reality, they are all doing it to compensate for certain optical illusions. The big contrast between this and the font design activity is that most of these things are, this kind of optical corrections are not taught in calligraphy classes, but most of the calligraphers, subconscious level, you can see, observe, they all do that to compensate for. So it must be something which is intuition based. So I found it fascinating when I learned brush pen calligraphy, that by default this comes into any visual sensitive person, that a lot of strokes we do deliberately do some offset or change in the angles to compensate for optical corrections. So this is, if you look at lowercase h, this is the way the sequence of strokes is. The first one is a upward stroke, and the after that you make a pause here, and then you deliberately do a change in the angle of the up stroke and then take it down. So this change in angle It's very deliberate, and in a subconscious level, we are doing this to compensate for this thick stroke over passing over it. So it is an interesting example of optical corrections done totally through intuition and through visual sensitivity rather than going by a structured learning process. So this is a very interesting example of how calligraphers do optical corrections. These are not documented or these are not taught with a specific focus that why we are doing it. But lots of calligraphers, especially in brush pen calligraphy, they do a lot of this kind of optical corrections. So this conscious decision is what I would like to focus on in optical illusion in calligraphy. So this is done in so many other characters whenever we do brush lettering. Another character is lowercase d. Also, you can see how the strokes are, the angles are changing whenever there is a thick stroke overlapping this kind of a diagonal stroke. So this keeps on repeating in many of the characters in brush pen calligraphy. There's a lowercase l, and lowercase b also is a wonderful example of how optical corrections are done and certain design decisions are taken to improve the legibility of the character. This is lowercase k. Again, this change in the angle of the upstrokes. And another interesting thing about brush script calligraphy is that brush pen calligraphy is that some of the characters shoot above the excite deliberately to create, but it creates an illusion of being of the same height, and it is done deliberately to create or improve the legibility of the character. Lowercase r is a very good example of that. In most of the brush pen calligraphy happening across, there is a common thing that this stroke goes much above the excite and comes down. So it theoretically it is not fixing into any grid. It doesn't align it to any grid, but still you can see how visually it appeals and it really increases the legibility. And if you look at certain other design decisions taken in brush pen calligraphy, is that there are a lot of deliberate decisions to improve the legibility of each letter. For example, N and U can be very confusing. So the way a lower in the upstroke meets the main stem is deliberately, instead of this, it is deliberately kept down so that this negative space contributes to improving the legibility of the letter form N. Otherwise, there is a lot of chances of N being uh, mistaken for other characters. So U is again an example where the upstroke meets the main stem much above than this way because they want this particular negative space to contribute to the legibility. So maybe it is the eye movement and the perception and the importance of negative and positive space in legibility might not have been theoretically analyzed and studied by all calligraphers. But intuition level and through visual sensitivity, all of them do this kind of take this kind of decisions while doing. Again, example is the lowercase m. So there are a lot of places where they could have kept this joint up, but most of the brush pen calligraphers do this way. So it is a very clear attempt at improving the legibility without any theoretical inputs. And lot of examples we can notice in the way brush pen calligraphy is done, where this kind of optical corrections are done throughout so many letter forms. The third part I would like to take you to the Muller layer illusion. and evolution of serifs. So everybody knows it is a very famous illusion that the three lines are actually of the same width, but because of the arrowheads, they appear to be of different widths. So if you look carefully, all the three lines are actually duplicated one after another. And it is this illusion is created because of the converging arrows and the diverging arrows. If I rotate this and keep it this way, and if I look at this way that this red lines are actually the same, which are duplicated, there you can see there is a lot of relationship between this and font design and typography. So I am trying to investigate into this, that did it affect the usage of serifs, or was this one of the reasons? There are so many reasons for our ancestors using serifs, not only because of the chisel, but a lot of other design decisions might have come into play to make use of serifs. So uh, as a font enthusiast and a typography enthusiast, I feel that this has something to do with some of the space management decisions of font design. So, if you look carefully, we can establish the fact that this diverging lines create an impact and help a designer to create a feeling of more height than it is there. So once this is established, we can also go into another hypothesis that maybe as this angle, if you keep on changing these angles, it might have led to the realization that actually serifs help a designer to create an illusion of more height than what is there, which in turn might have helped designers to achieve more legibility and lead the eye and make the eye more comfortable in reading or identifying text. So this might have been one of the reasons why serifs became very popular. And if you look at the design of the serifs itself, it matches this thing that it creates a feeling that the stroke is actually taller than what it appears to be. So this is the point I'm trying to make, that optical illusions are very important in typography, and this particular illusion might have helped our ancestor or font designers to make use of the serifs in creative ways. American typewriter is a very good example how this diverging lines and the negative space, the triangular negative space created by this diverging lines, helps a designer to create an illusion of more height, and which in turn increases the legibility of a character. Then comes comparing Bodoni and Dido. And Meridian is a very good example how this concept of diverging lines can help achieve a feeling of more height than what is there. I would like to conclude here. There are hundreds of arguments we can make about evolution of serifs and uh, the optical illusions, but this might be one of the reasons for popularity of serifs. I am like to thank everybody, and I would like to thank Sri Ravi Shankar ji. I'd like to thank ATypI team, and I'd like to thank IDC School of Design and everybody in IIT Bombay for helping me creating this presentation. And I welcome all of you to write to me in case of any discussions we can take forward. And I'll conclude here. Thank you very much. Namaste.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. How do you pronounce your name? Sreekumar?
Sreekumar.
Sreekumar? Sreekumar. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, thanks very much for the presentation. It's really interesting to see the path that you did go to say we started, of course, with typeface design. That we see more easily the relations between optical illusions, and then we went back to calligraphy to show that even though in more like a fluid artistic way, we still have the same principles.
Same
So
principle.
yeah, and then again you go back and apply that to typefaces, just
Yeah.
to trying to say, even I think it's really interesting to see that principle of how do we see, because of course the serifs, they do play a big role, or even sometimes pushing it up the baseline, or sometimes give the impression that is actually the alignment is different. So yeah, I'd like to start to say, I'd like to start asking you about, because you teach at the design school of
Yes.
how's it called, the school of design
Yeah.
in Bombay. So how do you apply that with your students?
What is that?
Do you apply that principles with your students? So
Yeah.
do you, how do you approach that on your teaching?
Yeah. So calligraphy is part of when we teach class on typography. One of the things is that we teach calligraphy. We encourage our students to do calligraphy in their own language. India has 22 official languages and hundreds of unofficial languages and more than 13 scripts used in the same country. No other country has this kind of, multilingual system.
Mhm.
So, and when we have another course called advanced typography, and as we go to the advanced level, then students take up projects on font design. Then we teach them in detail about the optical illusions.
Yeah,
But we,
nice.
yeah, at the
Yeah,
base level, we encourage all of them to do calligraphy as the
yeah,
mother of letterform studies.
yeah, because I find it interesting that, because I don't know, I'm not a calligrapher myself. I was wondering how it is, for instance, when, because at the beginning we start to write exactly the same way, like by repetition. So it's kind of trying to, like, as a way to improve your skill, is trying to get the same height all the time. And then eventually, I wonder how long it takes for you to actually make those conscious decisions about optical illusions and the importance of that. Because then it's almost that you have to challenge your own ideas, in a sense of, first of all, trying to do repetition, and later on, okay, now I want to get away with that. But it's still, of course, just apply written. But I think it's, yeah, I wonder how long it takes for changing that, and start making those conscious decisions, and actually to be comfortable with.
In calligraphy, none of these things are taught, and after some time, the person who's practicing, who's doing it, it comes to him like an intuition. So in calligraphy, we don't discuss optical illusions at all. Maybe by looking at other letter forms, it comes automatically to the practitioner. This kind of, for example, the lowercase h. So I have started observing 90% of brush pen calligraphers do that. And when I talk to many of them, nobody has taught them that this is the way to do it, or this is called optical illusion. They do it by intuition. There is very much difference between a calligraphic practitioner and a font designer. In font design, he's taught step by step. He's taught this letter. These are the optical illusions. The next letter. This is the way. Like that. There is a structured training. But in calligraphy, it is not there. So when you write a lowercase b, maybe they observe from other colleagues or people who are more experienced, and they take inspiration. But the thing is, most of the times it is very intuitive. But the core, the foundation is the same for both. So that is a point I'm trying to make. One set of people, the font designers, they do it after studying it in a formal way. Calligraphers do it, the same things they do, but they uh, are
Yeah,
not taught. But I learned that in font design, some of the decisions, many of those decisions you take on for optical illusion, they are based on the calligraphic strokes.
yes, yeah, it's really interesting. I have a question here from Siva on the chat. That is like, that some research has found that the Miller Lyer illusion is stronger in urban societies rather than in rural ones. So do you think that this has consequences for the development of serifs in different writing systems?
I personally don't think so. I have thought about this. The evolution of serif came at a much earlier time in the timeline than the concept of urban and rural came.
Yeah.
So it is as old as a mankind. And our ancestors, the first scribes, they used chisel to carve letter forms in stone. And the interesting thing is that a lot of historians attribute the evolution of serif to the fact that they used chisel for carving the letter. I don't agree with it because they were also designers and they were as capable as you and me in designing a serif. So, my hypothesis, for example, if you look at the Trajan column, in Trajan column, the first line, which is very much high on that stone, is of a different height than the line which is below that. So, as you go below one by one in a Trajan column, the height, the cap height reduces.
Yes, so
And
they do have a design thinking.
yeah, so
Yeah.
my argument is that those typographers, the scribes, at that time, they were as sensitive to visual ergonomics as you and me. They knew what is the angle of the neck and what is the angle of the eye when you look at the letter carved at that height. And they compensated for that accordingly, and they had a formula to follow, and they decreased, or sorry, they decreased the size accordingly when it comes to your eye level. So if they are so advanced, I personally believe the ancestors, they were equal, they did the serif by design, not by accident. So
Mhm.
my answer to that is that it was done much before the concept of rural and
Yes, Ishan, I also have a question about this, about the advent of serifs, if they are related to the idea of civic buildings in the urban setting.
yeah, before that, I have one more question. As you get better, things start bothering you. Then you look at what it is that is actually bothering you. I am talking about broad pen calligraphy. You soon notice you have to cheat with the angles. Yes, many times we change some of the angles at the last minute of a stroke. That is a deliberate attempt to create a swash or a finial. I agree with what you're saying. And next question is Ishan. Aren't the advent of serifs related to the idea of civic buildings in an urban setting? I will put it as these are around 200 years behind. So I don't think they are related because this was related. This concept of a serif was my understanding is that what I believe is that they realize the way the eye movement is from left to right when we many of the scripts, and the eye needs some kind of a guideline for reading very fast, and we read in groups of words. We don't look at letters, but visually the serifs play a very lot of important role in increasing the legibility. So that might be the reason. So I am not very clear about the advent of serifs related to civic buildings because it is in a different point of in a timeline, maybe 200, 300 years or more.
Yes.
There is some question, something from Martha.
Yeah, hi Martha.
Hi.
Yeah, it's only in conferences like this that you get to see people from exactly all over the world at the same time in their own time zones.
It is really, literally a virtual meeting room. Different time zones. Yeah.
Yes, yes. No, I think yeah, it's really interesting. And then also, I was looking, for instance, the American typewriter sample that you show up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
It's not like a flat serif. It's
Yeah.
kind of. So I
No,
wonder,
no,
even for
yeah.
yeah. So even for the design point of view, I wonder if how the designer make the decision about where to sit the baseline or the X height. because especially the one, of course, you have to do like some kind of compensation on figure out what it is actually the baseline.
Yes.
And it is interesting to see for different different fonts that are in the market that some of them deliberately are higher than the others. So one just kind of, you see the optical line is actually sitting on the baseline, and the typeface looks like it's floating a little bit. So yeah, I think that's something that, and then of course when it goes to calligraphy, I wonder how it gets trickier and trickier to figure out that, and it's still trying to get consistency.
Yes. Consistency is a very, very important thing in calligraphy.
Yes. And by the way, I'm wondering if you did try to show to calligraphers this system that like the way you showed to us when you go to upstroke and downstrokes, and by trying to reason how they do it and like applying the concept of optical illusions. How was the feedback? How do they say back? Say, yeah, I never. Did you have the chance to talk to some of them? And
Yeah. So most of them say that, oh my, I didn't know this, but I did it. It is like that. So it is all done based on intuition. Only thing is they have not put a label to it, or they have not put a theory to it. They have not written any research paper on it. That is it. But many
yeah,
of them were pleasantly surprised that many of the optical illusions you do in font design are actually based on the calligraphic tradition. For example, in a sans serif font, a monolinear font, you look at uppercase A, the stroke on the left will be slightly thinner than the stroke on the right, even on a monolinear font. So these are all based on the calligraphic tradition. But
perfect.
calligraphers are not aware of it. Yeah, calligraphers are
Yeah,
not aware of it. It is not taught in any calligraphy school.
exactly. Yes. All good. Do you have any more questions in here?
No, I don't see
No,
any.
probably, yeah, probably that's it. But the thing is, we had the chance now to go to the hangout room, where
Lord,
is, yeah, the hangout room. Because there we had the chance to everybody to turn the mic and camera on.
yeah,
Because I know that sometimes it's hard, especially talking about visual matters.
yeah.
Sometimes to write it down, so there we can have the chance to
I'll clarify.
continue the conversation. Yes, so I would like to invite all of you to go in there, have a chat, and then also check it out the rest of the agenda to see the talks that they're following up next. By the way, we are still uploading a few talks on the agenda, so please have a look at that later on, because we're constantly adding a few more. And then you can even on there in the platform you can even choose the ones and save as a favorite, so you can actually later on make sure that you're not gonna miss, because I know for different time zones sometimes you have to wake up at 3 in the morning to watch some content. And that's, I think that's one of the greatest things so far at the conference, that we get people that are watching out 2 in the morning, 7 in the afternoon, and so on. So yeah, thanks very much for sharing your
Thank
knowledge on
you.
that topic.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much for joining us and for moderating the session. Thanks.
yeah, that's all right. And then we'll see. Yeah, let's catch up in the hangout room. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for all of you that attended as well, and hope
Thank you.
you to see you in the future. Goodbye.
Bye.